Do you know they're deported American citizens? Terry Doughty is a Trump judge who last year ruled that a 2-year-old American child who was deported with her mother against her father's wishes, who was in the US, he said, the administration just deported an American citizen without any meaningful process. That was a Trump judge's verdict when he heard what ICE had done, right? In Minnesota, another Trump judge, her name is Nancy Brazel, appointed by Donald Trump. She said, the government asserts the right to arrest thousands of people, put them in an overcrowded warehouse, and then deny them their rights to due process. That's Nancy Brazel ruling against this administration on Fifth Amendment grounds. Again, Trump judges.
If you want to watch the exact moment the conservative defense of Donald Trump's authoritarian immigration and foreign policy completely collapses under the weight of real facts, you are in the right place. During a high-stakes debate at Dartmouth, progressive journalist Mehdi Hasan dropped a massive stack of receipts on the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles. Mehdi didn't just point to liberal critics, he pointed to Donald Trump's own hand-picked conservative federal judges. He revealed that in just a 4-month period, federal courts ruled over 4,000 times that this administration was illegally detaining human beings without a shred of due process. But it gets worse for Knowles. When confronted on the administration's unconstitutional shadow wars in Iran and Venezuela, Knowles attempts to claim that unilateral military action is as American as apple pie. In doing so, he accidentally delivers a hilarious cell phone, defining Donald Trump as a lawless president by his very own standards. Lacking any facts, any legal arguments, or any leg to stand on, the Ivy League-educated conservative host resorts to the absolute lowest form of deflection, mocking Mehdi's British accent. I'm Neel. This is The Honest Perspective. Today, we are exposing what happens when cheap right-wing talking points hit the brick wall of reality. Let's get into it. Let's start at the very beginning of the debate, where Knowles tries to argue that violating the Constitution is totally fine because other presidents have done it too. Watch how Mehdi instantly shuts down this historical whataboutism.
At this point, at this stage, anyone who tells you Donald Trump is not violating the Constitution is gaslighting you and or a member of his cult, right? The facts are very clear. We can go through them in order. I mean, right now, if you look at the Constitution, Donald Trump is violating the Appropriations Clause, the Emoluments Clause, the Elections Clause, the Taxing and Spending Clause, the Take Care Clause, the Declare War Clause. He's also violating the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the 10th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, maybe soon the 22nd Amendment, as he suggested yesterday. And, yes, other presidents, go back to your question, have violated norms. Other presidents have certainly violated clauses of the Constitution. But no president, certainly not in modern American history, has launched a deep-pronged, across-the-board, open assault on, forget norms, on the amendments and articles of our Constitution in the space of less than 18 months, right? Yes, previous presidents have violated perhaps a single constitutional amendment, sure, and been called out for it. But none of them said they plan to terminate the Constitution, as Donald Trump once did. None of them said, I don't know. When they were asked, as Trump was on Meet the Press last year, is it the job of the president to uphold the Constitution? I don't know, he said. None of them declared themselves a king or a dictator, even for a day. None of them were rebuked by their own vice president for trying to violate the Constitution and the rule of law. What did Mike Pence say? I know Michael's a big fan of Mike Pence. I came specially with a Mike Pence quote. Mike Pence said, President Trump demanded, I choose between him and our Constitution. If you are pressuring your own vice president to put you above your Constitution, you're not just violating norms, you're violating the Constitution, you're violating your oath of office. And it is very clear tonight, Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to the Constitution. Forget norms, let's raise the bar. To the Constitution, to the articles and amendments of the Constitution, to our rights and to our democracy. And you don't have to take my word for that tonight. Just take Mike Pence's. I've already conceded that previous presidents have done unconstitutional things, but Donald Trump has done it in a way that no other president has, in a time frame no other president has, without the excuses that other presidents could at least point to. World War II and the Civil War. You think that's what's happening in America right now when he goes after migrants in Home Depot parking lots? No, that is not what's happening right now. And let's just be very clear. Michael says no one could dispute that he's upholding the Constitution. He says histrionics. Do you know who Terry Doughty and Nancy Brazel and Amy St. and Trevor McFadden and go through the list, Fernando Rodriguez Jr., Alan Albright, Eric Committee, Carl Dudek, Justin Lang. We can go through the list. Do you know who these people are? They are Trump-appointed judges who have ruled against Donald Trump since last January in key constitutional cases. First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, 14th Amendment. They've all said, Donald Trump, what he's doing is violating the Constitution. These people are not liberals or Marxists, as Stephen Miller says. They're not doing histrionics, as Michael says. They are looking at the Constitution. And even as MAGA judges, they're saying you've gone too far. You have violated these amendments of the Constitution. It's Trump judges saying this, not me. It's Mike Pence saying this, not me. Michael can make these arguments about liberal histrionics. The problem is that people with eyes and ears who are not MAGA partisans see what is happening here. Donald Trump is doing things that President not done before, including ignoring a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling.
Do you see the trap Knowles laid for himself here? His entire opening defense of executive overreach is basically, hey, Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and FDR interned Japanese Americans, so why can't Trump do whatever he wants? It is an incredibly lazy, bad faith argument. Lincoln was fighting a literal civil war to preserve the Union. FDR was fighting World War II. Donald Trump is trying to bypass the Constitution during peacetime just to carry out a political agenda. And notice how Mehdi doesn't let him hide behind the liberal media excuse. He names the judges: Terry Doughty, Nancy Brassel, Trevor McFadden. These aren't progressive activists. They are Trump-appointed, conservative federal judges who looked at this administration's executive actions and said, no, this is flat out illegal. Which brings us directly to the core of the debate, immigration. And this is where Knowles completely loses his mind. Let's roll the second tape. In this next segment, the moderator asks if undocumented immigrants are entitled to due process. Knowles says yes, but then argues that not all due process is created equal. Mehdi responds with devastating, undeniable statistics. And watch how Knowles reacts.
So just to respond very quickly on the main point about deporting foreigners, you said at the end, who have no right to be here. Notice the phrasing. Deporting foreigners have no right. How do we know they have no right to be here unless they have due process? That's the whole point. When you end up deporting American citizens, do you know they deported American citizens? Terry Doughty is a Trump judge who last year ruled that a 2-year-old American child who was deported with her mother against her father's wishes, who was in the US, he said, the administration just deported an American citizen without any meaningful process. That was a Trump judge's verdict when he heard what ICE had done, right? In Minnesota, another Trump judge, her name is Nancy Brassel, appointed by Donald Trump. She said, the government asserts the right to arrest thousands of people, put them in an overcrowded warehouse, and then deny them their rights to due process. That's Nancy Brassel ruling against this administration on Fifth Amendment grounds. Again, Trump judges. Michael seems to be under some illusion that we're here Democrats versus Republicans. Unlike Michael, I'm not a partisan. I'm not here to blindly defend Democratic presidents. I don't really care what Harry Truman did. I already conceded. Presidents have done bad things, but no one has done stuff like Trump. Let me give you one example. 18 months he's been in office. 18 months. He's defied court cases, defied court orders in 1 in 8 cases. AP just did a story, the Associated Press, the other day. 31 court cases that he lost. He's just ignoring the court orders. Presidents haven't done that before. They violated the Constitution. Then a court says, hey, you did something wrong. And then they fix it. They don't say F off to the judges. That is what this president does. Let me give you another example on the immigration front. Between October and February of this year, according to a recent study, hundreds of judges across the country ruled 4,400 times. I'm going to say that again. 4,400 times judges across this country ruled that Donald Trump and his administration were illegally detaining migrants in this country without due process. 4,400 times. You find me another president, I'll wait here all day, who has done that in a 4-month period. 4,400 rulings by judges. By the way, in 1 in 4 cases where judges rule against Trump, these are Republican-appointed judges. So this argument from Miller and co, these are all Marxists. No, these are judges, conservatives, liberals, Democrats, Republicans saying Donald Trump's violating the law even when it comes to migrants, even when foreign students who have a right to be here and have a free speech right under the Constitution. First Amendment covers foreign students in this room. I hope foreign students here know that.
I'm a little confused by my opponent's argument because he tells me he's not a partisan and he's not here to debate Republicans and Democrats.
Almost
the very first word out of his mouth was Mike Pence and appealing to all of these Republican judges. But listen, I think the Republican Party is the worst party in the United States other than the Democrats. So, I'm not here to, as my opponent does seem to be, to go tit for tat on Republicans versus Democrats. We're here to talk about the Constitution, and we can't talk about how the Constitution has actually governed the country unless we talk about the people who have effected it, and those people are Republicans and are Democrats. But I'm also confused by my opponent's reaction, and I think this might be because the opponent here has the misfortune grown up in a foreign country did not learn proper English. The United Kingdom, they don't. So maybe he misheard when I spoke. But I answered in the affirmative. Of course, illegal aliens, in most cases, have the right to due process, but they don't have the right to lengthy due process. This has been a precedent for many decades. And in all of those cases, my opponent here cites the AP, this involves, these problems with the courts generally involve delays more than outright refusals. And both Barack Obama and Joe Biden have also been guilty of seeing delays. So I'm happy that in this one case, we are in agreement. The illegal aliens deserve due process, and now that they have it, they need to get out.
They're not getting it, Michael. That's the problem.
He did not learn proper English because he grew up in a foreign country. Think about the absolute desperation of that line. Michael Knowles, who went to Yale, who brands himself as a highly intellectual defender of Western civilization, is so thoroughly dismantled by basic judicial data that he resorts to a schoolyard insult about Mehdi Hasan's British accent. He completely ignored the statistic. He had no answer to the fact that federal courts ruled 4,400 times in a 4-month period that the Trump administration was illegally detaining human beings without due process. He had no answer to the fact that the administration has mistakenly deported actual American citizens. When you can't argue the law and you can't argue the facts, you attack the speaker's identity. It is the classic conservative retreat when their talking points hit a brick wall. But the desperation didn't stop at the border. It extended to Trump's foreign policy. Let's watch how Knowles tries to justify unilateral, unconstitutional wars in Iran and Venezuela, and ends up calling his own candidate lawless. In this final chapter of the debate, they clash over executive war powers. Watch closely as Knowles tries to defend unilateral military actions, only to walk right into a massive checkmate.
It's a great question, and I'm glad you mentioned the speed issue. Michael mentioned speed a moment ago when it came to migrants. There's no speed issue. Donald Trump bombed 7 countries last year after claiming to be the peacemaker and insisting on a Nobel Peace Prize, but he got a FIFA one. He bombed 7 countries which weren't attacking us. He started this year by bombing Venezuela and kidnapping the president of that country. Again, not a country that was attacking us. There was no self-defense right, no UN resolution. You can only go to war in this country under international law if it's self-defense or if it's authorized by the UN. Not the case in Venezuela. Not the case in Iran. Iran obviously was not attacking us. We were in the middle of negotiations when we attacked them. And Marco Rubio admitted we attacked them because Israel was about to attack them, not they were about to attack us. So there was no speed. There was no justification. And it is a good question about the balance. And again, I suspect Michael is going to say, well, all previous presidents have declared war without congressional approval, which isn't true, by the way. George W. Bush, I'm going to go home and take a shower after this, but I'm going to defend George W. Bush. George W. Bush went and got an authorization for the use of military force against Afghanistan in 2001. He went and got an authorization for the use of military force against Iraq in 2002. Now I feel disgusting, but George Bush did that, right? Barack Obama, when he was about to bomb Syria, tried to go to Congress, couldn't get the votes, did not bomb Syria. Now, Libya, Barack Obama did go and violate the Constitution and the War Powers Act. I will agree with that. But let me say a couple of things here. Number one, Barack Obama, he would argue, let me make the case for why it's different, to go back to your question. There's no comparison between Iran and Libya. First, there was a UN resolution for Libya being enforced by a NATO operation that the US joined to stop an imminent massacre of people in Benghazi. That was the stated aim. No UN approval in Iran, no NATO mission in Iran, no imminent massacre of civilians. That happened not when we attacked. Number two, Barack Obama claimed it wasn't a war because it was a limited military operation because no American troops were at risk and no regional escalation. Well, in Iran, 13 Americans dead, hundreds of Americans injured, not just regional escalation, but global fallout, right? Americans suffering at the pump because of this war. And number three, I would say this. Look, this is undoubtedly unconstitutional against Congress. Donald Trump's admitted it. He said, if I call it a war, I'll have to get approval. And then he called it a war. But I will agree it was unconstitutional under Obama. I think it's unconstitutional under Trump. And I hope Michael will agree that we can both agree that in both cases, neither president was upholding the Constitution. I'll add that to my list of constitutional abuses by Donald Trump tonight.
President Trump's policy in Venezuela is not only out of step with American constitutional norms, it is, in fact, part of American grand strategy dating back to 1999.
Prison in America is a nicer place than Venezuela.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just deal with some issues that you raised there. Michael made an admission he perhaps shouldn't have made there. Do you notice what he said about Maduro? He said, a lawless president. His words. Am I being dishonest? Is that what you said? A lawless president.
Not with reference to Trump.
But you said a lawless president would have just killed him. That's funny, because what did we do in Iran on day one of that war? We killed the leader of Iran. So by Michael's definition, Donald Trump is a lawless president. He went to war in Iran without congressional approval, without a UN Security Council resolution, as we've already discussed. He went to war in Venezuela without congressional approval or UN Security Council resolution. The idea that he did it because the guy's a drug trafficker is hilarious. I'm no defender of Maduro. Let's see what the court says. But he pardoned another Latin American head of government who was in American prison for cocaine trafficking into the US. He pardoned him. So real consistency there when it comes to drug trafficking. As for Nigeria, number one, it's not a genocide of Christians. The First Lady of Nigeria is a Christian. The Defense Minister is a Christian. Terrorist groups like ISIS in Nigeria and Boko Haram kill Muslims and Christians alike. It's a horrific violence, but it's not a Christian genocide. No one actually believes that. And even if it was, that's not the debate. The debate is, did he have the legal right to bomb Nigeria, or did he have to go to Congress, which he did not. He never goes to Congress. And let's take a step back here. Let's get out of the weeds here. What is the common thread tonight? It's not about just migrants or free speech or students or wars. It is about a president who doesn't just test the limit of the law, he puts himself above the law. Donald Trump doesn't recognize congressional restrictions. He doesn't recognize Supreme Court restrictions. Michael doesn't want to talk about a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling saying you got to facilitate the return of Kilmar Armando Ábrego García. And Trump says to an ABC reporter, I could, but I'm not going to. No president has done that before. You want to play whataboutism? And it is whataboutism. Tell me which president said after a 9-0 ruling, yeah, I'm not going to do it. There hasn't been one. It's only Donald Trump who does this when it comes to war, when it comes to migration, when it comes to Supreme Court. That is why we're saying he does not uphold the Constitution, because the evidence is clear. And if Trump were here tonight, he'd probably say, yeah, you're right.
And there it is, the ultimate cell phone. Michael Knowles argues that a lawless president would have simply executed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. But what did Donald Trump do in Iran? He unilaterally ordered the assassination of their top military leadership without a single vote from Congress. By Knowles' own exact definition, Donald Trump is a lawless president. But we don't just point out the hypocrisies here on The Honest Perspective. We bring the receipts. Let's look at what Knowles was trying so desperately to deflect from when he tried to claim these unconstitutional actions are just minor administrative delays or standard procedure. That is a flat-out lie. Look at the landmark case of Kilmar Armando Ábrego García. This was a 29-year-old Salvadoran man living legally in Maryland under a protective order. He was complying with annual ICE check-ins, raising his family, and working. In March of 2025, immigration agents detained him, lied to him about his legal status, and illegally deported him to El Salvador. And where did they send him? To El Salvador's notorious Terrorism Confinement Center, or CCOT, a brutal megaprison widely condemned for horrific human rights abuses. They locked an innocent man with no criminal record in a foreign terrorist jail. The Trump administration tried to claim this was just an administrative error. But federal judges didn't buy it. District Judge Polishini's called the removal wholly lawless. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, which ruled unanimously that the government had to facilitate his return. But the cruelty didn't stop there. Once the administration was forced to bring Ábrego García back to the U.S., what did they do? The Justice Department immediately dug up a closed traffic stop and indicted him on fabricated human smuggling charges as political retaliation. They weaponized the justice system to cover up their own lawless behavior. But in May of 2026, federal Judge Waverly Crenshaw threw the entire case out. The judge officially cited the Justice Department for selective or vindictive prosecution, ruling that the government only brought these charges because they were embarrassed by Ábrego García's successful lawsuit. That is the reality of the machine Michael Knowles is defending. It is not standard historical precedent. It is a lawless, vindictive executive branch that violates its own court orders, deports legal residents into foreign torture chambers, and then tries to jail them when they dare to fight back in court. And when Mehdi Hasan brings these cold, hard facts to the table, the best the intellectual vanguard of the conservative movement can do is say, well, you have a British accent, so you must not know proper English. It would be funny if the stakes weren't so incredibly high. They want unchecked executive power. They want to bypass the courts, bypass Congress, and treat the Constitution like a suggestion. And when they get caught, they collapse. If you believe in truth over access, if you believe in actual human rights, and if you want to see right-wing talking points dismantled with real, verified receipts, subscribe to The Honest Perspective. I'm Neel. Support the people. Question the powerful. That's The Honest Perspective, and that's where I'll leave you.